Okay. Hi, Renita. How are you?
I'm very good, Doug. How are you doing? Thank you for having me on the show.
Oh, thank you for coming on the show. I love all those books behind you, the old sort of bound, and those are very elegant looking, Even if you've
Thank
ev-
you.
even if you've never read them, they look really nice.
It takes many years to collect, many years to read, um, many years to reread. But I love to surround myself with books, the old ones, the leather bound ones, and the ones I have written as well, which are not leather bound, but hopefully someday.
We've got a book here called Vermilion Harvest. Is this How many books have you published?
This will be my ninth book. So eight before this, yeah.
Oh, okay. All right. It says on your bio that in a previous life you were a journalist and an editor and a writer, and I see National Geographic on here, Disney India, Cartoon Network Asia. Uh, you're in the United States, right?
That's right. I'm in California.
Oh, okay. Were you previously in India or in Asia somewhere?
I'm from India. I was born and brought up in Mumbai. I have lived in California for many, many years, approximately 22-ish years. There was a short stint in between where I lived in Hong Kong as well. So I moved from San Francisco to Hong Kong and then moved back to San Francisco.
Oh, all right. When you were a journalist, what sort of things were you doing? What sort of reporting were you doing?
Yeah, so I was primarily a radio broadcaster. I worked for public radio in Hong Kong and then also for Bloomberg after that in Hong Kong as well as here in the US once I got back. Um, so, but I was not, however, strictly, a radio broadcast. I did a lot of print as well. Some of that, a mix of that was freelance, some for publication. So there's, if you put both together, there's a lot of different media that I have actually contributed to, be it in print, radio, or TV.
When you were doing radio, was it live?
It was live. Oh, it was live. Yes, indeed. In fact, throughout my radio career, I have had pre-recorded shows on the weekends that tended to be magazine shows, but my day job, my mainstay, my bread and butter was always live. So those were days of very, very early mornings because I had a morning show. Um, I had different morning shows, but always a morning show, throughout sort of my radio career. So my day would start at 3 o'clock in the morning, sometimes if I was lucky, 4 o'clock.
Well, the reason I asked you about that is because I was on FM radio for many years doing a live sort of version of this show, and I hated it because what would happen is things inevitably would break down. Guests were calling in. This was before the days of, good internet. And it would generally be telephone. Things would always happen. And the comments that I would get were always, gee, that was so funny when the call dropped and you were talking to nobody for 2 minutes. And it's not the sort of image that we wanted for the show. We were trying to do something a little bit more clever than, a slapstick comedy, essentially.
Yeah.
So when podcasting became a thing, I jumped ship real fast and went to pre-recorded format. So what I was going to ask you was, did you enjoy the live part aspect of that, or would you have preferred just to have done a pre-recorded show?
Well, I have to say, Doug, I loved my life on sort of live radio. I did not like, those early mornings, waking up that early. I mean, but aside from that, once you get, into the pattern and into the drift of it, I actually, that whole adrenaline kick of the live show, prepping the show, it was a news show, financial news. So it was always different every single day. You could never predict. Yes, you would line up guests the day before, when producing the show, but even that was just the day before, usually hours before, because the news of the day would change so rapidly that you needed to really be able to call upon a guest who could speak to the news of the day, which was markets oriented, so news of the moment, so to speak. And absolutely, I do hear you. I definitely also worked in radio in the time when the internet was not so great. So it was always a challenge because you had to bring the guest into the studio. That was prescription number one. If that couldn't happen, then the guest had to join by phone, but it had to be a landline. No cell phones, smartphones, all that kind of stuff, because that would be challenging. And it was always a challenge because due to the nature of the show being a financial news show, the guests were invariably business guests, traders, or financial traders or money managers who would have a day job and would be reluctant to come in. Reluctant, not because they didn't want to be on the show, but obviously because it interfered with
They just had no
their day
time.
job.
Yeah.
So
Did you read off a
definitely
teleprompter when you were doing your show?
No, it was very old-fashioned. There was no teleprompt even. On the TV side, there was. But I was mostly radio, and for radio, there's barely no teleprompt. So literally, our show notes, when I say show notes, I'm not talking about post-show notes like we do in a podcast, but our notes that had been prepared in the production process or pre-production process before the show, literally all bullet points. We'd have 4 Bloomberg screens sort of flashing sort of where stocks were trading, what was happening, big news, anything that had broken. And it was up to us on the show, there was a couple of us, to actually look at those screens and switch and change, determine what we're going to talk about. Everything was sort of improv, if you will.
Oh, okay. Well, that would have made it more interesting. Because,
Yes.
I mean, let's face it, financial news can be rather dry. And
Yes.
to have the job like that, you really had to be on your toes to make sure that it flowed and there was some continuity to what you were talking about. Yeah.
It was, I have to say, never a dry moment or never a dull moment, because financial news is actually, it's not just, stocks trading here or there, but it is so based upon what is happening. If there's an election, if there's been a train crash, if there's been some other kind of, just incident, somebody died,
terrorist
or,
attack
whatever.
or something. Yeah.
Yeah, it affects things minute to minute, and you really have to switch and change course based on that breaking news.
Yeah, that's true. Well, let's pivot over to your book because we've got just about 5 or 6 minutes here. So, Vermilion Harvest, why don't you just tell us a little bit about this book? Give us an overview.
Yeah, absolutely. It is a historical fiction love story set against the backdrop of the Jallianwallah Bagh massacre, which was a very large-scale massacre that took place in colonial India in 1919. And here you have the protagonist is an Anglo-Indian school teacher who falls in love with a feisty Muslim student activist, and they are courting. These are the days of April leading up to the Spring Festival, which is to be held in Jallianwallah Bagh, which is a walled enclosure, sort of like a village green. But our protagonist gets wind of the fact that General Dyer, who is this British Army general, is coming to town to do something. She doesn't know what that something is, but it doesn't sound good. And she finds out the night before the gathering at the village green that he has actually established a curfew and he is planning to go and shoot on sight. So she scrambles, she tries to find her lover, her friends, other people she knows who are gathered there, but she, anyway, no spoilers. It might be too late by the time she arrives. So this is a fictional story. The love story is fiction, but the backdrop that it's set against is actual history. So the scenes, the situations, the characters, such as General Dyer, etc., real people, real incidents. And in some ways, I describe this as Titanic meets Gandhi. Titanic, not in the sense of oceans and ships and disasters, but a love story set against a disaster, and Gandhi because of the time frame.
Oh, interesting. Would this be, you said 1919, so would this be in the area that is currently Pakistan?
Actually, Amritsar is in India. It's currently in India, but Punjab, the state it is in, I should say, was split actually into two. And the western part of Punjab is in Pakistan even today, and the eastern part of Punjab is in India. Amritsar is in the eastern part, but the city of Lahore, which is literally just a few miles away across the border, is in Pakistan. So actually, between the cities of Lahore and Amritsar, where our story takes place, is an official border, and every day they've got sort of the changing of the troops, the changing of the guards. You can go to the Wagha border. You cannot cross over to Pakistan easily if you're Indian, or vice versa. But yes, it is a place which literally splits what used to be the subcontinent into the two nations.
Well, it was all part of India at one point, and then Pakistan, and then even Bangladesh, right, was all part of India, if I remember
Yes,
my
it
history
was
correctly.
correct. It was all the Indo-subcontinent, but none of these were nation states. And none of them they didn't become nation states until we achieved independence from the British colony in 1947.
So you said that you've published, this is your ninth book published. What were the other eight? Were they similar to this, or are they different genre, or what are they?
Quite different, quite different. I have my early books were Ayurvedic self-help books, so health and wellness books, self-help, health and wellness based upon Ayurveda, which is the natural medicine of India, the ancient medicine of India. In many ways, Ayurveda is to India what Chinese medicine is to China. That is perhaps the simplest way of saying it. I also wrote a book called Money Smart in English and Marathi for middle class. It was sort of a self-help personal finance book for middle class Indian women. And then after that, those were all nonfiction. But then I started writing fiction, and my earliest fiction book was When Arya Fell Through the Fault, a middle grade novel, which has subsequently become Shadow Realm and the Arya Chronicles series, a YA fantasy fiction series, which is out on podcast as a narrative fiction podcast, which I wrote and produced. But the book series is still in the works. And then my last book, Operation Mom, my plan to get my mom a life and a man, quite different, YA humor rom-com. So all of these are totally very, very different from Vermilion Harvest.
Well, it certainly sounds like it. We've got just about a minute left. There's one name on here that I have no idea. Maybe you can tell me who it is. Bhel Puri, is that how you pronounce that? Bhelpur.
Bhel Puri?
Yes.
Yes, Bhel Puri is Indian junk food, the street food of Mumbai, which really is a concoction of different ingredients, a little bit of this, a little bit of that, always made on the street. So, there's usually, the joke is, and perhaps it's not a joke, it's reality, there's a bug or two that's thrown in for good measure, to add to the taste and the flavor. And the end product is really something that is delectable to die for. It is this concoction of ingredients that comes together in perfect flavor. So in many ways, I use it as a metaphor for my writing. That's what I do. Rather than sticking to just one genre, I delve into various ingredients to bring together a bhel puri, a mix, which really lends my reading audiences or my storytelling audiences a flavor of Indian street food, Mumbai street food. That's kind of what I am.
Okay. What's the sweet thing that looks like a pretzel, but it's Is it jalapa or
Jalebi,
jalebi?
jalebi.
Jalebi, yes.
Yes,
Okay.
looks like a pretzel.
It looks like a pretzel, but it tastes like a donut, basically a
Correct.
crispy
That's
donut.
actually a very good way of describing it. Spot
Yeah.
on.
Okay. Well, I think on that, we're going to have to wind this down. Thanks so much for coming on the show. Has your book been released?
The book releases July 15th, so please do look for it. Pre-orders go live about 2 weeks before that, July 1st. So we're getting into June now, so it's coming up very rapidly. And yeah, I would love to have you read it, have people read it, have your listeners read it, and tell me what you think.
Okay. Last question. Do you have a website that you want to give out?
Absolutely. My website is www.reenita.com. Reenita is my name. That's spelled Reen for Nancy ITA.com. www.reenita.com. On the books tab, you will see all of my books, including my upcoming historical fiction novel, Vermilion Harvest. And if you sign up today, if you subscribe to my website, I am giving out a free first chapter. So I would love to send that to you.
Well, thank you once again for coming on the show. It was nice meeting you, and best of luck with your books and with your work.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Doug. I really appreciate your taking time today and having me on the show.